أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله. صلى الله عليك يا مولاي وعلى أهل بيتك الطاهرين. سلام الله عليك سيدي يا أبا عبد الله. يا ليتنا كنا معكم سادتي فنفوز فوزا عظيما. يا أبا عبد الله يا سيدي ويا مولاي، يا مظلوم يا مسلوب، يا عطشان يا مقتول ظلما، يا أبا عبد الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ولا تركنوا إلى الذين ظلموا فتمسكم النار وما لكم من دون الله من أولياء ثم لا تنصرون. Obedience. It's a big topic. And from that, there's loads of crossroads and loads of paths. Some of it is very hard to take on board. Some of it not so much. Some of which is quite clear. Some of which is a bit of a gray area, which people still seem to be quite confused about. Today we're going to be talking about quite a hard topic. A topic that a lot try to avoid for a good reason, even though it shouldn't be avoided at any cost, because it's from al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa-nahy 'anil munkar. It has to be done. A lot of people choose not to speak about this topic because it affects the viewers and it affects probably quite a big percentage of the people who do show up or the people who do listen. So they're very wary when it comes to this topic. Obedience is the key word, though. If we look at what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually wants from us, the test that He gives to us, if we look at what happened to the people who were created before us, we see that it's mainly about obedience. Our whole creation and the whole being, the whole purpose of us being here is to see if we will obey or disobey. What's our choice is going to be. It may seem like quite a minor thing, and quite a lot of people will probably just ignore it and think that it doesn't affect much or it doesn't really determine your future, but you can't just take the things that you like and leave the rest. أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. You can't just take what you like. The touchy subject of today will be the growing, or in another word, will be to leave your facial hair to grow, or in more detail, to leave your beard to grow. And why is it so important? A lot of people will just think it's, it's nothing. What's the big deal? Is it through growing a beard or things like that that may seem silly to them? Is that how we enter Jannah and Nar? Is this the big divider? What's the point? And we see again and again that people find these things that may seem small to them and they choose to ignore them. But later on there's big consequences. I guess the area to start off with is to show exactly why this is so important, or to prove why it's actually important through the riwayat of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. I'm sure a lot of people are aware, and most people do agree, that it is something that you have to do. Some people may not see it, some people may choose to ignore it, but I'm sure the majority of people do actually agree that it is something you have to do. Whether they've heard it from their maraji', or they've heard it from just the usual speaker that they listen to, or they've heard it even from a friend, but at least they've got the feeling that this is the right thing to do, but yet they still choose to ignore it. So most of us, inshallah, are actually aware of this. But for the few that aren't, inshallah, we'll mention some of the narrations that mention how important it is to do this. And that the key thing is obedience. If we're told to do something, no matter how silly it seems, we're told to do it just to see how obedient we actually are. It's not just for the sake of it. Even, for example, if we look at Hajj, if you explain the concept to someone who's never seen it before, say, for example, you try to explain when they do the tawaf around the Kaaba, you say to them it's a group of people, they go around and they start circling this giant piece of rock. It'll just seem completely silly to them. They won't understand the concept. But the key thing is obedience. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows this, and He explains that even the things I asked you to do, and inshallah it will come later on in the narration, it explains some of the things people will think that they're silly and they will think it's pointless. But there is a purpose why I ask this of you. The first narration, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وآله لمبعوثي كسرى, two messengers of Kisra. Rasul صلى الله عليه وآله said this to them when he saw that they had completely shaved their beards. لما رآهما قد حلقا لحيتيهما قال من أمركما بهذا فقالا ربنا يعنيان كسرى فقال صلى الله عليه وآله لكن ربي أمرني بإعفاء لحيتي. He said, who ordered you to do this? Who made you do this act? They said, our master, and they meant by master Kisra, their Rabb. So he said, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi, لكن ربي أمرني بإعفاء لحيتي. My master, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, has ordered me to leave my beard, not to shave it completely off. وقص شاربي, and to reduce the mustache, or to trim the mustache. This is the nas, this is the actual narration that we've got. This is just one of the narrations. There's many narrations. There's no need to mention all of them. But I'll mention maybe one or two more, inshallah. في مستدرك الوسائل للشيخ النوري عن الصادق عن آبائه عن أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام قال أمير المؤمنين عليه السلام قال رسول الله. So أمير المؤمنين is narrating from Rasul صلى الله عليه وآله حلق اللحية من المثلة. He says muthla is like, for example, if someone is dead and you cut their body parts, or even if they're not, even if they're still alive, like someone decides, for example, I'm going to chop this person's leg off or his finger off or anything like that. This is muthla. So Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi says حلق اللحية من المثلة. It's the same as cutting like one of your body parts. And then this is, he goes on to say something a bit more heavy and a bit more hard for people to take on board, but it has to be said. It is part of the narration, so I will mention it. He says after that, وَمَنْ مَثَّلَ فَعَلَيْهِ لَعْنَةُ اللَّهِ. It's hard. It's not easy to take on board. I mean, this is not an attack onto anyone who doesn't grow the beard or anything like that. This is just purely إِنَّ حَقًّا عَلَى الْمُؤْمِنِ نَصِيحَةُ أَخِيهِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. It's a right. You have to. If a believer knows something, he has to pass it on to other believers. It doesn't mean that he's better than them, or it doesn't mean that they're doing things that وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ will take, they're definitely going to Jahannam or anything like that. There's a lot of people that don't know certain things. And if people don't mention them on the manabir, if the scholars don't mention them, if the maraji' don't mention them, which alhamdulillah all the maraji' do, but if they don't, then everything will be lost, and people will be lost because of the lack of speech, because people are scared to portray these things, because they think, a lot of my listeners, for example, don't grow their beard. So I'm not going to choose this topic. But it's very important to show these things. الدين هو الأصول والفروع. You can't just pick one of them. The small things, the small side roads, if you like, you must mention. And the big things, the things that the whole deen will stand on, they have to be mentioned as well. It's a mix of both. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam in Nahj al-Balagha mentions a few very important things in his ceremony or in his khutbah. And you'll find it under the title of Khutbatun lahu alayhi salam fi dhammi iblis. It's where he's basically condemning shaitan, he's condemning iblis. There's a lot of important things. I'm going to mention a few of them because the whole thing will probably take about over an hour just to read it out. So I'm going to mention a few important things. The first thing will show you how important obedience actually is. And then later on we'll go on to see what the results are of disobedience. Imam Ali alayhi salam says in Nahj al-Balagha, وَلَوْ أَرَادَ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ أَن يَخْلُقَ آدَمَ مِن نُّورٍ يَخْطَفُ الْأَبْصَارَ ضِيَاؤُهُ ويبهر العقول رواؤه وطيب يأخذ الأنفاس عرفه لفعل. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted, and a lot of people say, why didn't he? Because where will the test be? There's not going to be any test, so what's the point? He says, if Allah has wanted to create Adam from a light whose glare would have dazzled the eyes, whose handsomeness would have amazed the wits, and whose smell would have caught the breaths, he could have done so. But why? Why didn't he do so? He then goes on to explain, وَلَوْ فَعَلْ لَظَلَّتْ لَهُ الْأَعْنَاقُ خَاضِعَةً. Great, then why not? Why didn't he? If it was that easy, then why didn't he make him in such a way that everyone would have wanted to do sajda, everyone would have wanted to obey straight away? Why did he choose to make him seem that he's less than them, but yet still ask them to do sajda to him? Why? He says, وَلَوْ فَعَلْ لَظَلَّتْ لَهُ الْأَعْنَاقُ خَاضِعَةً وَلَخَفَّتِ الْبَلْوَى فِيهِ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ سُبْحَانَهُ يبتلي خلقه ببعض ما يجهلون أصله تمييزا بالاختبار لهم ونفيا للاستكبار عنهم وإبعادا للخيلاء منهم. And if he had done so, people would have bowed to him in humility, and the trial of the angels through him would have become easier. So it shows you clearly, had he have done this, that there hardly would have been a test. It would have been very easy. Everyone would have obeyed. So why didn't he? But Allah, the glorified, trials his creations by means of those things whose real nature they do not know, in order to distinguish the good from the bad. That's it. It's purely that. That's the whole reason. And he goes on to say, and to remove vanity from them. This is another important thing. Kibar. Later on he goes to mention, he says, فاعتبروا بما كان من فعل الله بإبليس إذ أحبط عمله الطويل وجهده الجهيد وكان قد عبد الله 6000 سنة لا يدرى أمن سني الدنيا أم من سني الآخرة عن كبر ساعة واحدة. Allahu Akbar. He says, you should take a lesson from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala done with Iblis. Namely, he put down his great acts and extensive efforts on account of the vanity of one moment. Just one moment, look what it done to Iblis. This shows you how important obedience is. And Iblis, he says, although Satan has worshipped Allah for 6,000 years, whether by reckoning of this world or the next world. So all this worship that Iblis done, which none of us could do, who could be such a worshipper as he was? 6,000 years, and we don't know if this is the years that we're counting now or the years of Akhirah. Subhanallah. And one asyan. And people take it so easy as well. They're like, it's one thing, you know, I do everything else. I do salat, I do siyam, hajj, zakat. Everything that it's asked for me to do, I do. But what's the famous thing that you always hear? What's their famous excuse? What do you hear every time you say to someone, you know, why don't you grow the beard, even though you know it's something that you have to do? What's the reason? What do you always hear? Don't they say, هو الواحد يدخل الجنة والنار باللحية يعني? Isn't this what you always hear? Does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put people in heaven or hell just because of their beard? Is this going to be the decider? They make it seem so pathetic. But here you see Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam shows you how great Shaitan's ibadat were, how he was a great worshipper, and one disobedience, just on this one occasion, look where it put him. It kicked him out from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy. So why is it taken so lightly? If one disobedience, look what it done to one of Allah's best worshippers and His best angels. How do you think is going to be the case with you? And this is made even more clear, the consequence of disobedience. فَمَنْ بَعْدَ إِبْلِيسَ يَسْلَمْ عَلَى اللَّهِ بِمِثْلِ مَعْصِيَتِهِ كَلَّا مَا كَانَ اللَّهُ سُبْحَانَهُ. This is the most important part when it comes to proving the point that we're trying to prove. ما كان الله سبحانه ليدخل الجنة أحدا بأمر قد أخرج به منها ملكا إن حكمه في أهل السماء وأهل الأرض لواحد وما بين الله وبين أحد من خلقه هواد في إباحة حمى حرمه على العالمين. Who can remain safe from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala after Satan committing a similar disobedience? None at all, says Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Allah the glorified cannot let a human enter paradise if he does the same thing for which Allah turned away His angel from paradise. His command for the inhabitants in the sky and the earth is the same. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is fair. If He kicked out an angel and he was in Jannah for one disobedience, you think today with all the disobedience that we're seeing today that we're going to enter Jannah? Oh, what's Jannah and Nar? Is it just from growing the beard? Well, Iblis can say the same thing. He says, what's Jannah and Nar? Just one sajda I didn't do? All the thousands of years doesn't count? If someone should enter the Jannah in that case, Iblis should be the first one to enter. If all he done wrong was one sajda he decided not to. He says, you made him from mud and you made me from fire. Why should I do sajda? Similar thing people are saying now. You've given me the choice. I can shave it, I cannot shave it. So this is gonna be the decider, oh Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is gonna be the thing you make me enter hell for. Well, do you think that He kicked out an angel and He's gonna bring you into heaven for the same disobedience? There is no friendship, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. There is no friendship between Allah and any individual out of His creations, so as to give him license for undesirable things which He has held unlawful for all the worlds. What's the one thing that Satan wants to do? Shaitan alayhi la'natullah. What does he want to do? If he's been kicked out from Jannah for this disobedience, what do you think he's going to want to do to everyone else? What's the most thing that will satisfy him? To try to prove or to try to show that he hasn't done such a bad thing. The clear thing would be to put everyone else in the same category that he was put in, to make it look like that he hasn't done such a big thing. So there's nothing more that Shaitan wants to do than to see the humans make the same mistake that he did. And he said, رَبِّ بِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ. So the same thing that, oh Allah, you done to me, I'm going to do to all these humans. The same way you tested me in this one thing, I'm going to make ma'asi, I'm going to make disobedience to them seem so small that they will follow this and they will disobey you, and with this they will enter the hellfires. So He'll belittle the disobedience. He'll make it look so minor and so small that you'll think it's a silly thing, and you'll start making excuses for yourself. Oh, it's a silly, it's only facial hair, it's only this, it's only that. We don't, I give money to the poor, I do this, I do that, I'm a hard worker. Just because of this one thing that Allah's going to put me in hell, well, why should He have two different standards? If He had this standard with His angels, why should He have a different standard with the humans? It doesn't make sense. Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, in the last few things that he said in in this sermon, in this khutbah. He says, فَاللَّهَ اللَّهِ فِي عَاجِلِ الْبَغِي وآجل خامة الظلم وسوء عاقبة الكبر فإنها مصيدة إبليس العظمى. Exactly what we mentioned. This is the big trap of Iblis. This is the big trap of Shaitan. This is what he wants. He wants to trap you in the same way that he thinks he was convinced, or he was at fault. He wants to put you in the same fault. ومكيدته الكبرى التي تساور قلوب الرجال مساورة السموم القاتلة فما تكدي أبدا. He says, Allah, from the immediate consequence of rebellion and the eventual consequence of weighty oppressiveness, and from the evil result of vanity, because it is the great trap of Satan and his big deceit which enters the heart of people like fatal poison. This is how dangerous it is. It never goes to waste nor misses anyone. So everyone, he will try to approach in a different way. Everyone, he'll try to make a certain disobedience just to make you disobey in the things that may seem so slight to you, but in the end they make such a big difference. ما كان الله سبحانه ليغفر ليدخل الجنة بشرا بأمر قد أخرج به منها ملكا. Very important thing to remember. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kicked out his angel, why should he enter a human for the same disobedience? This is very important to remember, so that every time we do commit a disobedience, we can realize and we can see how important it is, and we can have this measurement in front of us at all time. Such deep words from Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. Always Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam didn't leave one thing that they didn't teach us. It was so important for them to show us exactly what the consequences of our actions are. And they also said, نحن نخوفكم ببعض الذي خوفنا به. We're only putting fear in you with the slightest bit of fear that was put in us. If you knew what we knew, you probably wouldn't comprehend it. We're only telling you just a little bit of what's going to happen, so that you don't get affected too much. Whereas if they told us exactly what was going to happen, we wouldn't even be able to see where we're going. And how did they get treated after all of this and after all their efforts? They were killed one after the other. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was slaughtered, and even his family, they didn't let them mourn Imam Hussein alayhi salam. They didn't even let them see them. They only let them pass by once after the death of Imam Hussein alayhi salam, just to see all the dead bodies. لما مروا بهن على القتلى مطرحتين ما بين منعفر في جنب مصطلم ومذ رأيت زينب جسم الحسين عليه بوغاء خضيبا بدم النحر واللمم نادت ودعتك الله يا عيوني. شنو؟ أنا يردون عنك ياخذوني زجري وخولل يباروني. خويا نخيت اخوتي وما جاوبوني يا اهل الحمية ما تجوني من ايد الاعادي تخلصوني. لانها تسمع صوت ويطرة الفجر حضروا نوق الهزل لاجل اليسر وخلوا العيلة على ولياها تمر وكل فجيدة الولي تريد علومه. يقول توادعت زينب ويا حسين الضمد وكل فجيدة توادعت ويا الولد. صاحت يا زينب، صاحت أنا ودايع ظل عندي بعد. شنو يا زينب؟ العالشريعة هامته مجسومة، ايه العالشريعة هامته مجسومة. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. يا الله يا الله يا الله، اللهم عجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان، واجعلنا اللهم من القائمين بخدمته ومن أصحابه وأنصاره وأعوانه يا أرحم الراحمين في ذلك اليوم وفي كل يوم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصل اللهم على خيرتك من خلقك أبي القاسم محمد وآله الطاهرين.